The streets are unaware of the full extent, but we do know that Chrissy's darkest secret was exposed in court, and it hit Jim like a bullet to the chest. Jim Jones almost spilled blood outside the courtroom when he suddenly snapped and lunged at Camron in front of a yelling crowd. Wasn't your average Harlem beef, though, and it rocked the entire industry. Some say Cam knew all along, some say Chrissy set it up, and some people are afraid to speak at all. Nevertheless, there is a missing witness, a leaked document, and an audio tape that allegedly shows Jim realizing he had been deceived for years. Why is everyone silent? No one expected Jim Jones to lose it like this in the Manhattan courthouse, but the tension was clear as the air became thick with lies, secrets, and the kind of betrayal that could rock anyone to their core. Camron, who was always cool but unpredictable, had been keeping a low profile. However, once you hear what really happened, you won't look at them the same again. Stiff shoulders outside the courtroom. Why was Camron even there? Why did Chrissy look dead at him when the judge said exposed? However, that was short-lived, because at the heart of it all was Chrissy Lynn. His name, once synonymous with love and loyalty in the hip-hop industry, now carried a burden of scandal and rumors. But this was real. The evidence was damning, and the courtroom had just become a stage for a showdown for which no one was prepared. When the judge's gavel struck to start the hearing, the room fell silent, and all eyes were on Jim, who faced a mixture of confusion and rage as he tried to understand what was happening. A court clerk handed the judge a document, and when it was read aloud, it became clear Camron, who had been sitting a few feet away, stood up for a brief moment, his face impassive, but the tension between him and Jim was so great that it could have caused the courtroom to buzz as their eyes met the deafening silence. Jim's hands were clenched, his knuckles white, but his voice was full of unfiltered emotion. "She's lying. This is all a setup." "Let's take this outside," Camron said calmly, his voice as cold as ice. But Jim, feeling betrayed and angry, wasn't having any of it. The crowd watched, unsure of what would happen next, and it was clear that Jim wasn't going to let this go without a fight. He stormed out of the courtroom, leaving a trail of rumors and conjecture in his wake. "You think I'm going to walk away from this after everything we've been through?" he asked, his words cutting through the air of the courtroom, and he followed him. In contrast to the electric tension between the two men, the normal commotion of the courthouse grounds seemed like a faint murmur. Jim was pacing back and forth, his mind racing with everything that had just happened to him. Chrissy's betrayal wasn't just about her, it was about the friendship, loyalty, and trust that they had developed. "What the hell is going on, Jim?" He barked, his voice rising. "She's been lying to me the entire time, and you didn't say anything I didn't know, Jim. You're taking this the wrong way. I've got your back," he said, taking a deep breath. Steady, but there was a tension in his eyes that made it clear that whatever was going on with Chrissy was much deeper than either of them. "Don't give me that," he said, his eyes softening for a moment as he realized that, despite his best efforts to deny it, the evidence was right in front of him. "What the hell are we going to do now?" Jim asked, his anger slowly building. Jim didn't want to believe that someone he had trusted, like family, could turn on him like this. The paparazzi had arrived, so why don't you two tell us what happened in the courtroom? One reporter shouted, "Is Chrissy's betrayal the reason for the rift?" Another reporter added, "Is Chrissy's betrayal the reason for the rift?" As he finished, a voice from behind them broke the tension, saying, "Hey, are you two going to stand here and argue, or are we going to do something?" Jim's face darkened even more as he yelled at the reporters in a frustrated tone, "You have no idea what's really going on here." He wasn't in the mood for interviews, especially with the world watching, but the damage had already been done. The more he yelled, the more Camron pulled him away and said in a low voice, "We can't keep doing this, man. The world is watching. We need to stay ahead of this." Jim nodded slowly. The two men stood there locked in their own private battle with the world watching their every move. The betrayal had been exposed, and the betrayal was not just about Chrissy anymore. It was about everything's lies, secrets, and friendships that were now hanging by a thread. Case hardening. He knew Camron was right, but there was something deeper that Jim had to think about. Jim wasn't willing to give up. In the midst of all of this, Jim Jones's phone was buzzing constantly, The screen was filled with an endless stream of notifications, and his mind was racing from one thought to another. But it wasn't just about her. Jim took a long drag from his cigar and looked at, "You're right to feel that way, but don't let the anger blind you, man. You have to think through it." The media storm was in full swing, with every outlet, from the biggest gossip websites to the local tabloids, consuming the drama. Jim muttered, "We're in the middle of something bigger." Messages poured in. Camron stayed by his side, and Jim didn't immediately respond. Instead, he just stared ahead. His thoughts clouded. He had always trusted Camron because they had been through so much together. But now that the pieces were falling into place, he said, "Something's off. Something's not just about her lying to you. There's more at play here." The two men then walked in silence for a few minutes until they reached a quiet corner of the courthouse parking lot. "You really don't know, do you? What the hell are you talking about?" said the voice on the other end of the line, sounding almost amused. "I've been running some serious games behind your back. You've seen the tip of the iceberg, but there's a whole lot more beneath the surface." The person on the other end laughed, alone. Jim couldn't shake the feeling that something darker was hiding beneath the surface, something he wasn't seeing. "This is going to get really messy for you," Jim said, clenching his fist and digging his nails into his palm. "I swear if she's been playing me, I'm going to make her regret it," he said, before the call ended, and he stared at his phone for a moment. The words that echoed in his mind were, "I'm not sure who it was, but they know something about Chrissy that could bring everything crashing down." Jim was about to respond when his phone buzzed again, turning to face Camron, who was wearing a mask of confusion and rage that wasn't just a warning, but a threat. Camron raised an eyebrow when he opened his phone. "We need to talk. You don't know the full story. Please don't do anything crazy," Chrissy wrote in the message, which made his heart race. Jim's eyes narrowed in shock because she was the one who had been playing me like a complete fool at... But before he could reply, another message arrived. Jim knew the location, a small private area where he and Chrissy had shared innumerable memories. But this time, the stakes were different. This was about betrayal, not love. He looked up at Camron, his mind racing, and said, "I'm going, but I'm not going in." Jim acknowledged that he wasn't the only light coming from a dim street. Lamp in the distance, Jim's hands were clenched into fists at his sides as he walked toward the entrance. Jim realized Chrissy was sitting in the corner, looking calm but nervous. Her face softened when she saw him, but her eyes lacked warmth. Later that night, Jim and Camron arrived at the meeting spot blind. "I need you to back me up," Camron nodded. "I got you, man. But we're not just walking into... You've got to be prepared for anything." With a knot in his stomach, Jim said to Chrissy, "What the hell is going on? You've been lying to me and controlling me, and now you want to meet with Jim? Let me explain that I never meant for any of this to happen." Jim folded his arms across his chest and said, "I never wanted to hurt you," searching for the right words. Jim's eyes blazed with rage. "What do you mean, don't give me that crap? What's really going on?" "I've been pushed into a corner, Jim," Chrissy said in a tremulous voice. "They've been threatening me, and they have dirt on me that could destroy everything, so I had no choice but to comply." Jim looked at her disbelieving expression and asked, "Who has been threatening you?" Before she could react, the door opened, and Jim's heart pounded as the door behind them slammed shut, leaving the room dark. What the heck is going on? A figure from the shadows, someone Jim had never expected. Jim's blood ran cold as the figure took another step into view, whispering incredulously, "Who the hell are you?" Jim's eyes shifted to Chrissy, who seemed as shocked as he was, and his fists were clenched involuntarily as he tried to process the situation. Jim realized then that the reality was more dangerous than he had ever imagined while he stood motionless, staring at the figure that had just entered the shadows. In a somber, almost menacing tone, Camron said, "Jim, you don't know the whole story. But you will. It's time to find out the truth and to quit ignoring the greater picture. I didn't mean to hurt you, but there are things that Camron has been a part of that you don't understand." The figure wasn't immediately responsive, but they moved into the dim light just enough for Jim to see their silhouette. The man who was supposed to be his brother, the one who had stood by him through everything, and the one who had stood by him when no one else would. It's not a setup, Jim. It's the truth. I've been working behind the scenes for longer than you realize, and throughout this time, I've never. Ake staggered back his head as Camron's voice grew colder with each word, as if the weight of his confession was finally being lifted from his shoulders. His voice was barely more than a whisper as he realized that his longtime friend, the one person he thought he could trust, had been betraying him all along, and that he had been working behind the scenes with the very people who were trying to destroy him. "You've been working with them," Jim said, the realization hitting him harder than any blow. "Yes," Camron replied, "but not for the reasons you think. You've been the target for a long time, Jim. You were the key to bringing everything down, and I was the inside man feeding them information and watching your SID and watching your every move so they could make their move, but not anymore." "What do you mean, not anymore?" Jim's voice was shaky with emotion. "You think you can just leave me after everything you've done?" Camron's eyes met Jim's with a cold resolve. "I'm done with them, but I'm done with you because you've been too wrapped up in loyalty to see the wider picture." And before Jim could react, he heard a car engine revving outside. He motioned for Jim to follow him, but Camron's face remained unreadable. The sudden tone change and the detached demeanor rocked Jim to his core. What was going on, and why was Camron acting so differently? "Let's go," Camron said, turning his back and going for the door. Jim stood there for a moment trying to understand what had just happened. He followed Camron outside, and he couldn't shake the feeling that he was walking into a trap. "We're getting out of here," Camron said firmly. "And you better be ready, Jim. This isn't just about you anymore. It's bigger than you. It's bigger than all of us." Jim couldn't understand it, his mind racing from one startling thought to the next, wondering what the bigger picture was and why he had been so blind to it. Jim felt his stomach turn as he approached the black SUV with tinted windows that was waiting in front of them. Jim was certain that the game had changed and that the stakes were higher than ever. The two men entered the SUV and the door shut with a loud thud. The driver, who Jim couldn't see, started the vehicle, and it began to move silently through the darkness. When the car came to a stop, they arrived at an abandoned building with its windows boarded up and covered in grime. Jim's nerves were tense, and he kept his eyes on Camron, trying to read his face for any signs that this was all a twisted joke. This made the situation more intense and made him wonder where they were taking him. Jim's heart was pounding as he entered the dimly lit building and saw the group of figures seated around a large table in the middle, their faces hidden by shadows. The man's voice was smooth and menacing. "Don't tell me you're involved in this too," Jim said, barely able to follow. Jim had no idea where they were going, but his mind was racing. Jim knew that he was much deeper into something than he had ever imagined, and this wasn't just about Chrissy. The man said, "Believe what I'm hearing," with a cold smirk. "This is just the beginning, Jim. You're about to discover the real reason everyone has been playing you." The shocking truth that no one saw coming is that Jim Jones was duped by the person he trusted the most, which led him into a world of corruption, betrayal, and deceit that goes deeper than we could have ever imagined. However, the question remains as to who is actually responsible for all of this, what their ultimate goal is, and where this dark journey will lead. Will be able to fight his way out of this, or if he has already lost the battle, your opinions could change everything. We have only just begun, and I assure you that this isn't the end. You don't want to miss what's coming next, but remember that justice always finds a way to come to light. If you think about the truth being revealed in this way, do you want to miss any more shocking revelations? I assure you that you will want to attend the upcoming explosive update. Is just the tip of the iceberg, so keep an eye out and pay attention. But pay attention, because often the most shocking and difficult things to accept and grasp are the facts. In the next one, you